We know there was only one woman who truly ruled the heart of the king of rock and roll. It wasn't Priscilla, it wasn't Anne Margaret, it was Gladys Presley. Their connection was spiritual, something from another dimension. But did you know that shortly after losing the love of his life, Elvis felt deeply betrayed by his own father? Today, we are going to enter the gates of Graceland to unravel the most painful family feud of Elvis's life. We're going to talk about Davada Dee Stanley, the woman the press called the wicked stepmother, and discover why Elvis refused to go to his own father's wedding and why he never accepted her taking the place of his mother. If you are a true fan, fix your pompadour, get your peanut butter and banana sandwich ready, and stay with me until the end, because this story has details that many documentaries don't tell. To understand the depth of the scar that Dee Stanley left on Elvis's soul, we need, first of all, to understand what August 1958 was. It wasn't just the month his mother died. For Elvis, it was the end of the world as he knew it. The relationship between Elvis and Gladys wasn't a common mother and son relationship. It was a spiritual symbiosis. They spoke their own language, shared dreams, fears, and a connection that many described as telepathic. When Gladys's heart stopped in that hospital in Memphis, a vital part of Elvis died along with her.
Eyewitnesses at the funeral say that Elvis wasn't just sad, he was hysterical. He threw himself over the casket, begging her to get up, touching her feet, weeping convulsively. He was inconsolable, destroyed. That 23-year-old boy, whom the world saw as a symbol of rebellion and strength, was reduced to a terrified child, alone in the dark. His grief didn't last weeks or months, it lasted a lifetime. He never, ever got over it. And it is in this scenario of emotional devastation that the figure of Vernon Presley enters, along with what Elvis considered the supreme betrayal. Vernon, the father, of course felt the loss of his wife. But Vernon was a practical man, a simple Southern man, and he dealt with the pain in a very different way than his son. While Elvis turned his grief into an untouchable sanctuary, Vernon sought companionship to fill the silence. A few months after the funeral, Elvis was sent to Germany to fulfill his military service. He took his father with him, perhaps in the hope that, together, they could heal the wounds far from Memphis. But it was in Germany, in the city of Bad Nauheim, that Elvis's nightmare began to take shape. While the king of rock tried to be a good soldier and dealt with the depression of loss, Vernon met Davada Dee Stanley. The situation started wrong in Elvis's eyes. Dee wasn't a single woman. She was married to an American military sergeant stationed there. The fact that his father was getting involved with a married woman while the earth on Gladys's grave was still fresh turned Elvis's stomach. That went against all the Christian and family principles that Gladys herself had taught. But the worst part wasn't the adultery, it was the speed. To Elvis, it seemed Vernon was eager to replace Gladys, as if she were an old piece of furniture that could be swapped for a new one. Elvis viewed that as sacrilegious disrespect. How could anyone occupy the place of the woman who had given her blood, who had gone hungry so they could eat, the woman who was the architect of the Presleys' success? When they returned to America in 1960, Elvis's hope was that the vacation romance in Germany would end. He wanted to return to Graceland and feel his mother's presence. He wanted him and his father to live out their mourning together in the house she loved. But Vernon had other plans. He brought Dee to the United States. And he didn't just bring her, he announced the wedding. The date was set, July 3rd, 1960, less than 2 years after Gladys's death. For Elvis, time stopped. He felt stabbed in the back by the only man he should have trusted blindly. The tension in Graceland in the days leading up to the wedding was palpable, almost suffocating. The Memphis Mafia, Elvis's loyal friends, were walking on eggshells. No one dared to mention Dee's name in front of him. Then the day arrived. Vernon left for Huntsville, Alabama for the ceremony, and Elvis took the most eloquent action of his personal life. He stayed home. The press speculated, fans whispered, but the truth was raw and painful. Elvis Presley, the model son, the boy who bought a pink Cadillac for his mother, refused to see his father get married. It wasn't a tantrum, it was a declaration of principles. By not going to the wedding, Elvis was telling the world and his father, "I love you, but I love Mama more, and I will not validate this union." He remained in Graceland, surrounded by Gladys's memories, while his father signed the papers that made the entry of the wicked stepmother into the Presley dynasty official. Quick pause here, Elvis family. I need to know your opinion on this attitude. Do you think Elvis was right to boycott his own father's wedding out of loyalty to his mother? Or do you think he was too harsh on Vernon? Comment down below. Elvis right or Elvis wrong? I want to see what the majority thinks. That day, July 3rd, marked a fracture in the relationship between father and son that never fully healed. Vernon chose to move on. Elvis chose to stay in the past, guarding his queen's throne. And when Vernon returned home with his new wife, expecting to start a happy new life, he found the gates of Graceland open. Yes, but his son's heart was locked forever regarding this new woman. The Cold War had begun, and Elvis was armed with the most dangerous weapon of all, absolute indifference. Imagine the scene. The musical gates of Graceland open, and the Cadillac drives up the driveway. Vernon Presley brings his new wife home. Dee Stanley steps out of the car, looks at that white and imposing mansion, and probably thinks her new life as the matriarch of the Presley family is just beginning. She believed she would be the new lady of the house, the woman who would bring order to the star's life and his father's. What she didn't know, and what she would discover in the most painful way possible, is that that position was already taken, and the owner of the title, even though she was no longer physically present, would never be destitute. For Elvis, Graceland wasn't just brick and mortar. It was the physical body of Gladys's love. Every curtain, every trinket, every piece of furniture had been chosen or touched by her. Her scent was still in the hallways. Her room was intact, like a sacred sanctuary where time dared not pass. When Dee entered and started trying to impose her presence, suggesting changes in decoration, wanting to move furniture or alter the domestic routine, Elvis saw that as a profanation. It was as if someone entered a church and started painting the stained glass windows another color. Elvis's response wasn't violent. He didn't scream, didn't break things, and didn't make dramatic scenes in front of the staff. Elvis's response was absolute ice. He initiated a campaign of silence and invisibility that was much sharper than any insult. Little by little, the atmosphere inside the mansion became unbreathable. Accounts from those who lived there at the time, members of the famous Memphis Mafia, say that Elvis simply stopped visiting the rooms where Dee was. If she was in the living room, Elvis went up to his room. If she entered the kitchen, he left. The most sacred moment for a Southern family, dinner, became a silent battleground. Elvis, who loved the communion of meals, started eating upstairs or at alternative times, just so he wouldn't have to sit at the table and see that woman occupying the chair that should have been his mother's. He treated her with impeccable Southern manners, but devastating ones. He called her Ma'am or Miss D, but never with warmth, never with affection. It was a mechanical politeness, an insurmountable barrier that clearly said, "You are my father's wife, but you are nothing to me." Dee tried to get close, tried to act with a maternal familiarity, but she hit a concrete wall. Elvis transformed her into a ghost inside his own house. The situation reached an unsustainable point. Vernon, stuck in the crossfire between the son he idolized and his new wife, was visibly uncomfortable. Elvis realized he couldn't kick his father out of the house, but he also couldn't live under the same roof as her anymore. The energy of Graceland was contaminated. It was then that the king made a strategic and definitive decision. He bought a house on Hermitage Drive. The property was adjacent to Graceland, the backyards practically touched. Elvis had the house renovated, made everything spotless, and gently invited his father and stepmother to move there. It was a masterstroke. He kept his father close. Vernon still worked in the office behind the mansion every day, but removed the unwanted female presence from inside the sanctuary. The message was clear and brutal. Dad, you work here, but you two live there. With the move to Hermitage Drive, Elvis regained control of Graceland. The house returned to breathing Gladys's memory, free from the interference of the wicked stepmother. Dee was effectively exiled to the neighboring house, forbidden, by an unspoken rule, to circulate freely through the main mansion as if she were the owner. But this story has a twist that shows who Elvis really was. Dee didn't come alone. She brought her 3 small sons, Billy, Rick, and David Stanley. In any other situation, it would be natural for Elvis to transfer the contempt he felt for the mother onto the sons. But Elvis Presley had a heart that couldn't fit in his chest. While he applied the freeze-out on Dee, he opened his arms to the boys. He looked at those children and didn't see enemies. He saw boys who needed a role model. Elvis welcomed the Stanley brothers. They grew up running through the halls of Graceland, swimming in the pool, and playing with the king. Elvis became their big brother, their mentor, and their hero. He bought cars, paid for the best schools, and later gave them jobs and a purpose in life. This distinction is fundamental to understanding Elvis's mind. His problem wasn't blind. He didn't hate the Stanley family. He specifically rejected the attempt at maternal substitution. By treating Dee's sons as his own brothers, while keeping their mother at a distance, Elvis proved that his attitude was a defense of honor, not an act of malice. He protected his territory, expelled the invader, but saved the innocent. It was his final triumph in that domestic feud. He dictated the rules, protected his mother's memory, and still came out as the hero of the story for those boys. Seriously, what a man's attitude, right? He separated the mother from the children and took care of the boys as if they were his own blood. I want to hear from you watching. Would you have that greatness of spirit, or would you have trouble accepting her children? Tell me in the comments if you agree with the king's attitude. If Elvis had reasons to distrust Dee Stanley's intentions while he was alive, death ended up proving that his instincts were as sharp as a razor. August 16, 1977, didn't just mark the end of the King of Rock. It marked the beginning of a cruel battle for the narrative of his life. With Elvis in the grave, the protective shield that kept the Presleys' privacy under control disappeared. And it was in this power vacuum that the figure of Dee Stanley revealed a face that many fans already feared. The hardest blow came through public exposure. Shortly after the tragedy, the world saw the release of books and interviews where Dee decided it was time to tell her truth. But for Elvis's devotees, who valued discretion and family dignity, that was a profanation. In the book Elvis, We Love You Tender, and in media appearances, Dee exposed the intimacy of Graceland in a way the family had never permitted. What hurt the fan community most wasn't just the stories told, but the perceived opportunism. While the family struggled to deal with the devastating grief and maintain the dignity of Elvis's legacy, Dee seemed willing to put the spotlight on herself. She broke the code of silence and loyalty that governed the singer's inner circle. For those who know Elvis's ethics, who always protected his own and kept his problems behind closed doors, seeing the stepmother selling stories of the family's private life was confirmation that she never really understood what it meant to be a Presley. She tried to insert herself into the legend of Elvis as a central piece, but her actions after his death had the opposite effect. Instead of gaining the public sympathy, she alienated the base of loyal fans, the TCB crowd, who saw in those books an attempt to profit from the memory of a man who never fully accepted her. She attacked his privacy when he could no longer defend himself. However, late and silent justice came through Vernon Presley himself. And this is the saddest and most revealing chapter of this saga. Vernon, the man who brought Dee into their lives, the man whom Elvis tried not to hurt by pulling away, ended up realizing too late that his son was right about the dynamic of that relationship.
The marriage of Vernon and Dee didn't stand the test of time, and, more importantly, didn't withstand the tragedy. They divorced in 1977, the same fateful year Elvis died. In his final months of life, Vernon, sick and heartbroken over the loss of his only son, lived the weight of his choices. The veil had fallen. Vernon finally saw what Elvis saw on day one, that union didn't have the solid, sacred, and altruistic foundation he had with Gladys.
Elvis's revenge was historic, without him needing to say a word. Reality took care of everything. Dee Stanley ended her journey far from the inner circle, seen by millions not as the matriarch she dreamed of being, but as a figure who tried, unsuccessfully, to rewrite history in her favor. No final das contas, the legacy of this feud leaves us a powerful lesson about Elvis Presley's intuition. Often, he was judged as stubborn for not accepting his stepmother. But looking at the outcome and the way the family's intimacy was commercialized after his departure, it becomes clear it wasn't stubbornness. It was clairvoyance. Elvis knew that, in Graceland, loyalty can't be bought and trust can't be imposed. By defending Gladys's place against everything and everyone, he was actually trying to protect the very soul of the Presley family against exploitation. He was right. From day one, the king was right. This story shows us that behind the capes, the sparkly jumpsuits, and the world records, there was a man with a loyal heart who loved his mother above all else and who fought to protect what was sacred to him. Elvis wasn't perfect, but he was authentic, and that is why, decades later, we are still here talking about him. Now, I want to summon the true Elvis family, the TCB taking care of business crowd, to enter this conversation. Do you think Elvis did the right thing in keeping this barrier to protect Gladys's memory? Or should he have acted differently? Right here in the comments, I want to read everyone's opinion. The debate here is always with respect, as the king would like. And if this deep dive into the history of Graceland touched you, if you felt the truth in these words, do 3 things now to keep this legacy alive. 1. Smash that like button. Show YouTube that the king still reigns and that we want more quality content about him. 2. Subscribe and hit the bell. Don't be just a visitor at Graceland, be part of the family. Turn on all notifications to be the first to know when we bring more rare and emotional stories. 3. Share. Grab the link to this video and send it to the family group. Send it to that friend who knows all the lyrics by heart. Let's spread the true story, far from the gossip and close to the truth. Thank you for watching until the end and for helping to keep the flame alive.